Hi, how are you today? The issue of implementation is really one of the most difficult things in strategic management. The business world is replete with optimistic plans that have been abandoned. They were never implemented. So implementation is absolutely key. Without implementation, strategic plans are only words. Whenever I first considered this subject, this is the view that I had. I had a linear model of the strategic management process, where logically we analysed the firm to find out its strengths and weaknesses. Then we have a look at the environment to understand the opportunities and threats, and that gives us SWOT, S-W-O-T. When we've done that, we logically formulate a mission, set the goals, set the targets. Once we've done that, we can develop the strategies, implement them, evaluate them to see how well they have gone, and that feedback enables us to tailor new strategies to changing circumstances. This was the linear and logical model with which I started. Oh my goodness, how reality changed that. In working with firms, I found it to be an essentially very messy process where things weren't done in order, where all sorts of emergencies arose and were solved or not solved, and people who had more clout than others had more influence. It was nothing like that. Nothing at all. So in terms of the recommendation that I would have, I think we should start at any point in the any cardinal point in the strategy compass. For example, if the firm has a problem with its competitive position, start there. Or if the firm has a problem with its asset utilization, start there. So I'm saying that it really doesn't matter where you start at any point on the strategy compass, the point that's causing most grief or most concern. And then once you've started, you can then engage in what I call concentric discussion. Concentric discussion is where you go round and round and round. For example, if we started with leadership, we might go to competitive position, or if we started with competitive position, we might then go to leadership. And the same with asset utilization, we might start there, or we might go from competitive position to asset utilization. The same sort of argument with markets addressed, and so on. And similarly, leadership might go to asset utilization, competitive position might go to markets addressed. We can go round and round and round, getting ever closer to a solution. So we once again have this rather messy approach, but it's bounded by the parameters of the strategy compass. Strategic plans have great variation. They can vary from rigorous numerical targets where sales in every year, profit, every ratio is plotted out, and that is the strategic plan which is set in stone. And at the other end of the spectrum, we can have vague areas of intention, or indeed plans that are never written down. So I'm suggesting here a more balanced approach where we have, in my opinion, an appropriate amount of rigor and an appropriate amount of flexibility. And in terms of coming to this view, I think I've learned from life. All parents have strategies for raising their children. They may never be written down. I hope they aren't, actually. And they may never be made explicit. But this tends to be the situation for most of the parents that I know. The parents tend to have a long-term strategy for their children. And this is non-explicit, verbal, certainly not written down or tested. And it usually concerns things like this. I really hope my child will have an appropriate degree of social success. They get on well with people. Academic success. They do fine in school. Professional success. They're going to have a reasonable career. And personal success. their relationships with other people are going to be harmonious. But within these long-term things, there are shorter issues that are measured. Exams, how are they doing exams? Sports, how are they shaping up in terms of sports? Party invitations, are they being invited to parties? Or are they being isolated? These are the shorter ones that are measured. So I'm suggesting that the strategies for raising children successfully have two elements to them. First of all, long-term, unmeasured, maybe implicit agendas, and within those there are shorter-term examinations in which the child is measured, but always within those broader parameters. I think a similar situation prevails in successful firms. There are long-term values in terms of the firm's competitive position, assets, leadership, markets, etc., which maybe aren't all that explicit. They're just part of the firm. And within those, you have the shorter run strategic plans. The shorter run strategic plans follow the strategy compass, which is what this book is about, and they're about a year, or run for 2 years, or 3 years, or whatever, and they are measured and acted upon. So, I'm going to suggest that firms which are successful habitually for year after year after year, they have a type of innate strategic principles in which the shorter term strategies are always set. And I'm going to suggest as well that the individual projects or products, they're less important than adhering to the innate strategic principles. Let me give you two examples here from the automobile industry. Innate strategic principles in Toyota. You can read them there. And what's amazing about it is they've never been written down. They're just part of the culture. And if we look at BMW, it's the same sort of thing. It's part of the culture. So everyone expects a new BMW automobile to have the characteristics of this culture. The shape of a strategic plan, the oral tradition versus the written word. I think in almost all organisations, except the very largest, the oral tradition is hugely important, that people discuss. It's not just an arid written document. And the strategy compass is the vehicle for discussion or the template for discussion. So I'm suggesting a 2-stage approach to strategic planning or its implementation. Articulate the strategic principles. What are the principles that are perennial in this firm? And then develop within that envelope, the shorter run strategic plan. Stage 1, articulating the strategic principles. Describe in words, what is the firm's posture in terms of C, A, L, and M? And then complete the skeleton strategic plan, which has already been the subject of a podcast. As usual, almost all the hardware and software is due to Apple, and I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast. And here is how you can buy the book. 2 options. Thank you for listening once again, and goodbye.